Good evening, as you all heard. My name is Joel Green, and I'm very excited to be speaking with you all today. I would like to begin by stating how incredibly honored and humbled I am to have been selected as a recipient of the Steinmetz Family Scholarship. This is arguably one of the most amazing gifts that I have ever received, as it allows me to take a step closer to achieving what I believe is my life's calling. As such, I am honored. I'm incredibly humbled as these opportunities, both being a medical student and getting a scholarship, just do not happen to people like me. And to give you a better understanding of why this gift is so meaningful to me, please allow me to share a very truncated version of my story. Like an elaborate mosaic, who we are is a summation of multiple intricate experiences. And for me, the richness of my own experience is only clarified now as I look back on this journey through a lens of newfound appreciation. So I grew up in the slums of Harare, in a country battling economic instability brought about at the hands of a ruthless dictator. Through this, I've endured many challenges, some very apparent, like hunger and poverty, but others not as clear but of equal significance. And as I look back at my past, there's one experience that is etched in my mind. And it is this experience that truly changed the trajectory of my life. So the rails rattled as the mortuary rack slid out the cooler and a cold mist spread across my face. As the shroud was undraped from over her face, almost instantaneously, tears began to roll down my cheeks. I was living my worst nightmare. Right before my eyes lay my mother. I never knew that only 2 nights earlier, when she told me that she loved me, would be the last time I would hear her voice. I was barely a teenager at the time and came from an impoverished single-parent home. While growing up, I had essentially no exposure to medicine. However, after Mom died, while tragic, that revealed the need for and encouraged me to pursue this path. Despite the astronomical obstacles blocking me from achieving this goal, I remained resilient and persevered. So this drive stems primarily from those heartbreaking emotions I felt as those tears rolled down my face. Like many impoverished people living in Zimbabwe, my mom's death could have been prevented if she had access to adequate healthcare services. However, for us, that was not an option. You see, my mom suffered from a severe form of uterine fibroids for many years. She constantly tried to seek medical attention, but she was turned away as we could not afford the care that she needed. Now, sadly, over the years, the disease progressively worsened to a point where she was bleeding constantly for months without end, and eventually her body could not bear this suffering and she passed away. And it was in that moment, as I stood there with my teary eyes staring at Mom, that I realized the need to be there for people like her and to do everything possible to spare others from the heartache that I felt. Through all this sadness, I found my why to pursue medicine, but the how proved even more challenging. You see, after Mom's passing, I was orphaned, and I had nowhere to live. I was bouncing from place to place without any concrete stability for a few years. But thankfully, during this difficult time, I moved to the US to live with extended family. Now, even though the transition to life in the US was difficult, once I was here, I was fortunate to attend an accelerated high school program at one of the top schools in northern Indiana. This was challenging with my lacking formal education, as Mom could not afford to send me to school. Going to school has actually always been a dream for me. In fact, as a child, I would walk to the far edge of our community. There was a school there, and I would sit bare feet, because we didn't have shoes. I would sit bare feet atop a rock, and I would watch as other kids walked into the school, very neatly dressed, backpacks on. In Africa, most schools wear uniforms, so I always wanted to wear a uniform. But unfortunately, as I sat there, I would wait and hope that someone would come say, "Hey, buddy, come on, let's go to school." But unfortunately, that never happened. However, here I was, many years later, having the opportunity to go to school. And although I was excited to go to school, I was so nervous and had so many fears. I did not know whether I was able to understand anything. Keep in mind that up to this point, I had essentially no formal education. Now, fortunately, my mother did teach me how to read and write at an early age. And in fact, when I was living, in Africa, in the slums, like I would always, if I had a chance to read something, this sometimes like allowed me to expand my mind and dream beyond the barriers that were right in my face. So ultimately, I think it was a combination of, being able to read and write and a ton of hard work that made me, or at least afforded me the chance to graduate as one of the valedictorians from this high school program. Now, navigating high school as an undocumented student was not particularly challenging, as everyone had similar experiences. However, when I went to college in undergrad, my immigration status was a terrible burden. And it reared its ugly head at every turn and prevented me from having the same opportunities as my peers. Specifically, it prevented me from taking advantage of great opportunities like applying for research scholarships, being a TA in class, or even getting work-related clinical experience, as all these things require you to have some form of legal status. Now, while going through this, the real difficulty was feeling like I was thriving in school because I was doing really well, but I always had this constant feeling like my goal could not be achieved. I was plagued by a chronic fear of deportation, a feeling like all those endless nights that I had spent studying could just suddenly be taken away from me. Now, fortunately, I'm no longer undocumented, and although that chapter is over, going through that anxiety and uncertainty of life taught me to be empathetic and compassionate with others. The reality is that everyone goes through a difficult moment at some point in their lives. And it is in these moments that we need someone there to help us. That is what medicine means to me. Doctors are there to catch their patients when they're at their most vulnerable moments and they're needed the most. Ultimately, as I look back on this journey, I appreciate all the struggles I faced, as it was reflections on those difficult moments that showed me what I should do with my life. There are many metaphorical references that have stemmed from my experiences growing up, and I've used these metaphors throughout my life to highlight certain things. As I sat atop that rock at the edge of the school, day after day, waiting and longing for someone to come and give me an opportunity, no one came. However, now someone has shown up. Through your extraordinary generosity, you are that someone. You have afforded that little guy who would cry to go to school both the opportunity to realize his wildest dreams and hopefully make his mother proud. And for this, I'm incredibly thankful. As I continue this extraordinary journey, although I'm not certain what the next chapter will bring as far as, what I choose to do specialty training-wise, I know if I remain true to myself, I will end up exactly where I need to be, or rather where I can have the greatest impact. Thank you for listening to my story.